Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Criterion 40. We are brought to you by CreateContext.com. You can head over there for more film reviews and analysis. Each week, we are looking at a different film in Criterion's 40th anniversary Blu-ray collection. This week, the 1993 film Naked. Mike Leigh's 1993 film Naked is one of the more modern films in the Criterion 40 collection, but also one of the least approachable. The film is darkly bleak, bitingly funny, and brimming with these insufferable characters. But for all its obfuscated tones, Mike Leigh has made a film that is resonating, even if it resonates for the wrong reasons. This is the sixth film I've watched now in the Criterion 40 collection, and I'm starting to kind of see a pattern emerge. Criterion 40 are the top 40 most picked Blu-rays and films from the Criterion's closet. These films are all picked by actors, directors, people in the industry, so it's all really picked by artists. And the pattern I'm starting to see is many of these films deal with characters who are both massively arrogant and massively insecure. It's an interesting theme for artists to be picking these type of movies. So the first we looked at, Federico Fellini's 8.5, it follows this brilliant filmmaker who's crippled by his desire to make something better than his previous works. All That Jazz, it follows an artist at the end of his life, a life in which he's worked himself almost literally to death and must come to terms with his failures and his mortality. Naked may not follow an artist, but it does follow a man whose only successes in life seem to have come in spite of himself. David Thewlis plays Johnny, the lead character in Naked. He is a sexually promiscuous, morally flexible, conspiracy theory obsessed Englishman who gets by life through thievery and his charm. He begins the film by having this rough intercourse with a woman in an alley. This encounter soon turns too violent for the woman's liking, and she forces him off of her, only for him to steal a car and find refuge in the closest scorned lover he can find. Johnny is one of the most unpleasant lead characters in all of cinema, but he has a certain charm that propels the film and mystifies all the characters around him. He spends most of the movie seducing women or charming men with his large vocabulary until they eventually tire of his antics and send him packing. Outside of his debonair demeanor, we can see the true Johnny, the Johnny that he himself sees, a loser who's just floating through life, causing havoc everywhere he goes. Aside from Johnny, the film follows Greg Crutwell as Jeremy. Jeremy is the perfect juxtaposition to Johnny while also being more or less kind of the same character. Jeremy is wealthy, respected, and by all accounts hardworking. These are adjectives no one would ever use to describe Johnny, but aside from their differences in their outward appearances, each man shares the same flaw. They have this terrible habit of using, abusing women, and just an all-around total lack of a moral compass. Jeremy is clearly the villain of the film, but it's interesting how Johnny is just as, if not more, insufferable than Jeremy throughout this whole movie. Jeremy is more violent towards his sexual partners than Johnny, but only slightly so. And Johnny is less controlling over his partners and the people he meets throughout the film, but that's only because Johnny doesn't actually hold any real power. The film creates these two characters, the two sides of the same coin. Both men feel entitled to act in any way they please, but only one of them is actually powerful enough to do so. A major theme of Naked, and one that Johnny will spout to anyone in listening distance, is the end of the world. A world ending that will be brought on by the new millennium. This film was made in 1993, at least it was released in 1993. I'm assuming it was made maybe the year prior. And the new millennium 2000 was on us, upon us, and that was a huge conspiracy theory at the time, and the film uses that as a plot point. Johnny is a wealth of knowledge on this useless information pertaining to the new millennium. The information he uses to drive home a point that no one cares to listen to. It's impossible to not look at this film through a 2025 lens. In a world full of conspiracy theories and misinformation, we can see Johnny using the same tactics as flat earthers or anti-vaxxers. They have all this information, they've done all this research, but all of it is just meaningless data from easily manipulated sources. The minute Johnny begins citing Nostradamus and these seemingly meaningless data points that come together as proof that the world will end, most of the people he's interacting with in the film just tune out. They can't argue their point because Johnny is making a point based on data that only he knows and only he has studied. He puts his would-be disciples in an impossible situation where only he can be right. And it's painful for everyone unlucky enough to come in contact with him. Naked catapulted both director Mike Leigh and star David Thewlis's career, and it's easy to see why. This film is provocative and deep while still feeling contained and claustrophobic. The character of Johnny is one that is tough to master, but Thewlis manages to nail this performance. We instantly get that Johnny is an awful character, yet we fully see the appeal he has to every unlucky patron in this film. We all have a friend, or at least know someone that's like Johnny. A person, usually a man, who is too smart and charismatic for their own good. They just kind of drift through life, through work and school and relationships. They're never able to excel, but they never fall too far behind either. They succeed, however merely, in spite of themselves. That is the Johnny character to a T. As soon as he's warm out his welcome in a warm bed with an attractive woman, he's only a quippy joke and some charming banter away from the next. Until he inevitably wears out his welcome again, and it's on to his next con. Through all of Johnny's escapades and groan-inducing rants, we start to see the brief cracks in his demeanor. Johnny is slowly realizing he can't keep up this life, and despite his massive ego, incredible intelligence, and persuasive charm, deep down, he is riddled with insecurity. This is not a new theme. This is not a new narrative, a new plot device. Most famous example I can think of is Gus Van Sant's 1997 film, Good Will Hunting. That film pulls a very similar narrative, albeit it does so in a much happier, audience-friendly tone. Where Matt Damon's Will Hunting in that movie gets a redemptive arc and a happy ending, Johnny ends this film just as he began it. There's no redemption for Johnny. He spends the entire film causing problems until they finally catch up to him, and he ends up on the wrong side of a massive beating. Rather than learn and receive this unearned grace that's extended to him by one of the female leads in the film, Johnny just reverts to his criminal ways and literally limps away from this problem, limping away from one problem onto the next until it's inevitably going to catch up to him. Johnny is an unlikable hero, but it's the juxtaposition between the characters of Johnny and Jeremy that I found the most fascinating in this film. The two share many of the same flaws, but one character is able to get away with it while the other suffers. Johnny is insufferable in this movie and he wears out his welcome, but so is Jeremy. Only no one dares to challenge Jeremy because of the power and the stature that he holds. It's really interesting watching this film in 2025 after the reckoning of Me Too and seeing films like last year's Blink Twice. Naked may not have been trying to out the evil men of the time, but what it did is it highlighted how much easier it is for a guy with a nice suit and a little bit of money in his pocket to get away with his abhorrent behavior. Johnny's acts eventually catch up with him. We see it at the end of the film. That's kind of his arc. He ends the film broken and bruised, limping away onto the next time. And you know that Johnny is not going to learn. He's always going to be terrible. And it caught up with him badly at this point, and it's only going to get worse. But Jeremy leaves with just as much power as he began the film with. Johnny's story is sad. We're sad for the man that he is and the man that he's become and the man that he'll never be able to get away from. But it's the women in the film who bear the brunt of the pain. They receive pain from Johnny and from Jeremy, but only one of these men, the one with the least amount of money, gets a comeuppance. Jeremy just gets to kind of leave and walk away and continue to be terrible, while Johnny ends up having to pay for his actions. Even if they're not the actions he should be paying for, it's an interesting dichotomy, and it's an interesting thought project in 2025 to watch this 1993 film about men just being awful and what happens to them and how some get away with it and some don't. I don't know if we're supposed to root for Johnny in this film. I don't think we are. I think the film is very aware that he's an insufferable, pretty terrible character, even in 1993. Naked is a really interesting film from 1993. It might not be my favorite from the Criterion 40. It's actually the one that I feel I connect with the least. I found it the hardest to watch so far, and the one with a message that I found the hardest to parse. I didn't really like many of these characters in this movie. I didn't really like a lot of the actions they were doing. There was no one for me to really root for. And I understand that isn't really the point of the film, but it doesn't make it any easier to watch. If any of you found something deeper in 1993's Naked, something that resonated with you, maybe that I didn't see, I would love to hear in the comments. We'll be back on Friday with a new weekly movie minute, and next week with a new Criterion 40. If you guys want to catch any of that, please subscribe. That would be really cool. And I'll see you guys next time. The Criterion 40 is a Create Context podcast. Head over to createcontext.com for more film, reviews, and analysis. Our theme song is Hindsight by Shyloon, provided by the Riot Games Creator Safe playlist. We drop new episodes every Tuesday at 8 a.m. The Criterion 40 is a Create Context podcast. Head over to createcontext.com for more film, reviews, and analysis. Our theme song is Hindsight by Shyloon, provided by the Riot Games Creator Safe playlist. We drop new episodes every Tuesday at 8 a.m.